Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. Hope you're enjoying your weekend, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Today we're going to be focusing on where Kentuckians live, housing, real estate, and property values. Later, the president of the Lexington Bluegrass Association of Realtors, Ty Brown, will be here. We'll be talking trends, including why it's so tough for many to find homes for sale right now. But first, Fayette County Property Valuation Administrator David O'Neill is here. Current projections indicate Lexington will add another 40,000 residents between now and 2025. That's coming fast. The question is, where will they live? Many are pushing the city to open up more areas for home development, but Fayette County also has worked hard to protect its bluegrass horse farms and green spaces that make the place so attractive. We'll talk about that and what our property values doing these days with a very busy man, PVA David O'Neill. Thanks for coming. We appreciate you coming in today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is interesting, this recent revelation that Lexington will add 40,000 residents in the next 8 years or so by 2025. Very much attention getting. How much pressure does that add to Lexington to consider opening up some areas for housing development?
Well, it puts a lot of pressure on the housing market because we're not really keeping pace with demand. We haven't been building a lot of new houses in recent years, particularly at the lower end of the economic spectrum. So there's a significant amount of pressure that I think is going to have to be relieved one way or another, either through significant improvements in the way we approach infill and redevelopment or some type of modest expansion. But there will be a lot of talk of expansion in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully we will take very seriously and use that as an opportunity to incentivize infill and not just expand for the sake of expansion.
Are you concerned that this is not getting the attention that it might require, given that this population is increasing so quickly?
I think that it's getting attention through increase in property values and property taxes, and the fact that people are motivated to purchase a home and they're having trouble finding something in their price range or what they thought was their price range. The inventory of houses available on the market, there used to be a year's supply of inventory on the market a year ago, and now that's down to just a couple of months. You hear anecdotally, you hear every day that a property sells in a day or a matter of hours or before the for sale sign even goes in the front yard, and it's making it difficult for people.
How do leaders in the bluegrass deal with this delicate balance of the need for more housing, because people want to be here in this beautiful area, but one of the reasons they want to be here is because it is beautiful and natural and there is so much green space and farmland. Isn't that pretty tough to balance?
I think it is, and there's no question that the rural character of Fayette County in central Kentucky is a significant part of what our national brand is, and we've done a very good job of preserving and protecting that, and we can't stop now.
Would decisions have to be made rather quickly in order to, I mean, let's say if 2025 is the year that everybody's concerned there will be this large bump will have happened by then. I mean, to get the permits out there, get the property acquisition done and homes built would take a while, wouldn't it?
There would be some lag, that's for sure. But the magic of 2025 is that was the period of time for a housing study that was recently commissioned by several groups, including the Realtors and the Builders and Fayette Alliance, who's a preservation group for the bluegrass, and various government agencies, including Downtown Development Authority. That's the reason the focus is on 2025. But we've been increasing our population at a fairly steady rate for a number of years. And so with the increase in population and increased enrollment at UK and various reasons, there's increased demand in housing, and we're not really meeting that demand right
and while
now.
you serve Fayette County, you're well aware that this is happening in the surrounding counties as well. The pressure is there too.
It is, and actually it's happening all across the country. It might be a little bit more intense in Fayette County because we do have this artificial impediment to supply and demand, the urban service area, so there might be a little bit more pressure. And as there's a decline in available property inside the urban service area, then that's going to put even greater pressure on supply and demand. And then I think that's why we're really seeing it now. There's a discussion that we have about 5,000 acres available for development inside the urban service area, but there's a difference between land that's available for development and whether or not the owners are sufficiently motivated to sell and develop it, and that may not be the case yet.
For those who may not know the term urban service area, what are we talking about as a boundary?
Well, Lexington was a leader nationally many years ago in establishing this urban service area to control growth, keep development and growth and sprawl out of the rural areas and keep it focused in an urban service area. So we've got We've got about 55, 60,000 acres inside the urban service area where almost all of us live, and then there's another 125,000 or so acres in the rural area where the farms are. And right now that area cannot be developed. You cannot divide land by anything less than 40 acres outside the urban service area.
So there is some initial talk of moving that line?
Well, there is every time that the comprehensive plan gets updated. Every 5 years there's discussion of it, but I believe that that has intensified for this year because of what we're seeing in the housing market.
What are property values doing out there right now?
In the last 5 years, they've increased by 20%. Median sale price has. Now, part of that is a shift because people are having to buy more expensive houses because that's what's available. There's a definite shortage of houses at the, let's say, 200,000 and below, and the inventory increases as you get above 200,000. So some people are having to make the decision to buy a more expensive house than maybe they would have, but in general, that's going to be attributed to property values, up 20% in 5 years.
You're coming out of a very busy time, and I know you have been meeting with some property owners who have, in some cases, contested the ruling that you have made to change the way property values are calculated on these larger tracts that were considered farmland before and taxed as such. It was brought to your attention last year. You aggressively moved to make some changes in that. What are you hearing from folks?
Well, there were several hundred property owners that were affected by the change in how we're approaching the agriculture classification, and I wanted there to be some appeals that would move forward so we could get some definitive answers at authorities higher than my office. So there's probably about 100 cases right now that have filed formal appeals that will go before the local Board of Tax Appeals and then advance probably to the state Board of Tax Appeals, but I think that's a good thing.
Do you meet with the people when they come to your office to discuss an appeal before they go on to the take it higher?
Well, there's 23 of us at the PVA office and 111,000 parcels of property. So when it's the protest season, it's all hands on deck. But on the issue of the agriculture land, I met personally with every single one of those landowners that came in.
The Fritz Farm, the summit out at Fritz Farm is now considered online. You know, it is opened up. It was an area that previously had been agriculture. So did that, since it is now operational, that went to a higher tax bracket? Yes,
and it did before. So we only assess property and change its status on January 1 of every year. So the developers of Fritz Farm bought it in June or July, and that following January we took off the ag classification, put it on at fair cash value of, I believe it's about $13 million, which was their purchase price. For this year it's increased, I believe, a little over $40 million, and they're still only maybe 25% complete as of January 1, so I would imagine it'll be in excess of $100 million next January.
There seems to be a lot of redevelopment in some areas. You look at along Walton Avenue, you look in a lot of downtown and the perimeter of the downtown area. People have gone into these sort of gentrified neighborhoods and are doing major projects. Does that mean that the property taxes are going up in those areas, and how does that affect people who've been there all along?
It does, and that's the issue with gentrification that you hear about, that affects people in two ways mostly. One of them is it drives up property values throughout a neighborhood and increases people's individual property tax bill, but also investors will come in and start paying more for houses than they had before, and people who live from hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, that's a tough decision whether or not to sell. And some of what we're seeing here is that they're making the decision to sell without realizing there's nowhere to go because we have an affordable housing crisis as well.
What attracts the attention of your office when you're doing reassessments? You do them on a regular basis, but then there are times that you go back and you look at maybe an improvement that has been done to the property?
There's several things that triggers a reassessment. We reassess every individual neighborhood once every 4 years. The entire state's on a quadrennial plan, and that's usually when you get reassessed just for economic conditions. But also if you take out a building permit and improve your property through a remodel or add square footage or an addition, valuation, and then also it gets reassessed by sales. And for residential property, it's all based on sales. So we will look at sales in a neighborhood, analyze that, make adjustments for your house based on common sense stuff like square footage and number of bathrooms, and that's how properties are reassessed.
But you go apply for a permit to add on a room or add a pool or do some major project, you're likely to go take another look.
Well, we're going to get a copy of the building permit, and we'll decide whether or not that really is value add, and we'll follow up on it. And any time anybody's property increases by the PVA's office from one year to the next, you're given a notice of it and an opportunity to come in and discuss it with us and contest it and provide evidence. Remember, we don't go inside people's houses. We don't do full-blown appraisals. So we want property owners to be involved in this iterative process of getting to the right number.
Anything else you'd like people to know about what your office does in terms of the way it serves people and the challenges you face?
Well, follow us on our website, FayettePVA.com. We have a lot of information out there. You can go online and look up any piece of property in the county, see pictures of it, the sales history, who owns it, and we also keep a lot of fresh content out there to keep you informed on what's going on in the community.
Do you plan to run for re-election next year?
I love my job, so yes, I'm up in 2018 and I plan to seek re-election.
I mean, you're tempted occasionally, aren't you, to look at other options?
I've had a lot of opportunities. I think that this job is a really good fit for my particular skill set. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out something in the future, but I love what I'm doing now.
All right, David O'Neill, the Fayette County PVA. Thanks for coming by. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hope you'll stay with us now on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Lexington Association of Realtors President Ty Brown joins me next, and we'll talk about those houses for sale or the difficulty in finding places for sale right now. Just ahead on WKYT. We welcome you back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. The fact that the Lexington housing market is pretty much on fire right now can also be a huge challenge for realtors. We get word that some properties are being sold hours after they're listed, and many realtors are just about begging for listings. It's a challenge throughout the Bluegrass region, where there are more wanting to buy than there are those ready to sell, it appears, in many cases. Ty Brown is serving this year as president of the Lexington Bluegrass Association of Realtors, and he's good to come in and talk about these trends and maybe how, if you're interested in selling, you might be able to improve things as well. Good to see you, Ty. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
So how would you describe the market out there right now for home sales?
Well, the market's up, and it's typically this time of year is the busy time of year, but this year's been a little twist into it because there's probably the same amount or maybe a few more number of buyers in the market. There's just not as many homes that are available to be ready to be sold right now that are available, that's causing some issues with buyers not being able to find a home.
Yeah, we talked to the PVA before you sat down here just a little bit ago about what he is concerned about potentially becoming a shortage of supply of homes in the future. Do you share those concerns? Yeah,
we do share a lot of the same concerns. Dave, we've talked to him in the past, and the issue I think is not just here in Lexington. It's kind of a nationwide trend. There's just a lot of population, and when we come out of the bubble that we were in for so long in the economy, the way it was, builders just stopped building for 3 or 4 years there, and that's just quite frankly not really picked back up. And then when it did pick back up, there's some issues that are holding builders back right now, especially locally. They're keeping from maybe building enough, and the ones they are building are quite frankly a little priced out of what typically would be an entry-level home, so it doesn't really start that cycle of move up for buyers that you typically see, especially this time of year. What would be the circumstances that would cause that to all get right? I mean, I think it all comes down to availability of places to build, and there are some regulations and some environmental things that are adding costs to it that ultimately cost gets passed to the buyer. And I think the price of a new home right now, I looked the other day, the lowest price home that's on the market, a new home, is $200,000, and that's over the median home price of $189,000. So it's just. So comparing this year to last, given the fact that you're having to overcome that factor of there being fewer homes on the market for sale, how are the numbers? Well, the numbers are interesting. If you go, LBAR serves 3,000 realtors in 22 counties, so we have to go with our overall numbers. And since we're sitting in Lexington, we'll talk about our Lexington numbers as well. Overall numbers for our area, the new listings are down like 10 or 11%. So there's same amount of buyers, 10 or 11% less homes to go on the market, which brings total activity down for April down 6% from last year. So total sales were down. Fayette County is a little bit flipping around. New listings are down 16%, which is a bigger number, but the actual sales were up. Prices went up, and so I think it kind of a natural supply and demand kind of thing starting to happen.
So what you're saying, if I hear it all correctly, is that you're getting the inquiries of people wanting to buy, but they're
Yes.
they can't find something that fits. I mean, that's one of the challenges.
Right, and buyers get frustrated. Sellers, even it starts a situation where some sellers try to come into a market unrealistically. People are still only going to pay what a home's worth in a market, basically, for the most part. So it's very important to know, both a buyer and a seller, to know what you're doing, have a plan, and have everything up front. We suggest you talk to a realtor about realistic expectations to be ready. We talked about that the last time. Have your ready to go. That's probably the biggest thing, is being prepared. But as sellers right now, some sellers are reluctant to put their home on the market because they're like, why would I put my home on the market if I don't have a place to move to? So that's maybe overblown a little bit to some degree. It takes longer. You're not going to go out Sunday, maybe find the house like you normally could this time of year. It might take you a few weeks, but just had to come in with a plan.
But some do fear that risk of selling and not having somewhere to go.
Yeah, I think that's again, I think that's something you can sit down and talk to your realtor about. What's realistic? Some areas are harder than others. Some are just fine. But the fact is, the home's going to be out there. You might pay a little bit more than you would have 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and that's probably a good thing overall. But the homes are still available. You just have to have a plan and have a realistic time period and have a way to go forward.
Are the stories true that we hear that sometimes realtors are almost to the point of knocking on doors and asking people, would you like to sell?
Not almost, they are. And that's a nationally trend. People are knocking on doors and talking. And could be good or bad. It's their business model, however they want to do it. You know, I think that these times of markets create a really competitive atmosphere. So it's very important for not only realtors and buyers and sellers and everybody just kind of take the deep breath, sit back and do the things that they're supposed to do and for their situation. And I think sellers and buyers should be talking to somebody about that.
When you were talking about being ready, you mean financially qualified, have everything ready so that you can move? Because right now, if you are talking about moving, again, you better be ready to act fast, right?
Both buyers and sellers.
Yeah.
You know, a seller, when they put their home on the market, has to have a plan. I mean, where are they going to go if their house sells today? Buyers need to be prepared for what they can actually buy in this market and what's available, and be ready to not, because quite frankly, if it's one of the hot areas in town and a house comes on the market today, it's probably not going to last very long just because of supply. So they may have to take a lunch break and go look at it. And the realtor has to be on their game, and the buyer has to be on their game and be ready to go quickly and be prepared for that, and realize that it's not a market where you're going to, you know, get a 20% discount on a house necessarily. It's just not going to happen.
Are there some areas that are really pushing this trend along?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're typically hot areas. I mean, your 40502 areas a lot of times, this part of town, the growing part of town, but for really, it's all over the place. It's every market, or every little market. And there's a lot of, redevelopment and infill stuff going on downtown as well. Homes are being, fixed up and resold. It's all over the place pretty much.
I know there was a time when, school district lines were very important, and I know that's often very important to families deciding where they're going to locate. In this market, in this kind of climate, do you have as much choice as you might have had before?
It's probably the same. I mean, people are still, that's probably one or two top concern or question that we get is, price in school districts. So it's probably still very important, or it is very important. But I think that there are some situations where people are taking, giving in on some things here and there to be in a home, just to be in a home, and that may be one of them. But it's probably least likely to be give up on.
Yeah. What are your observations about the rental market? I mean, we were hearing, well, millennials don't want to own homes, that they're going to be renting, and yet we see that now that may not be proving true in the Lexington area.
Well, there's two sides to the rental market. There's the renter and there's the owner. Yep. So both of those have their unique what's going on with it right now. Renters typically are paying more. Renting is expensive. We've seen several new homes or new apartments going on out here in Hamburg, and they're not cheap. And so a homeowner can almost always own a home cheaper than they can rent for in Fayette County right now. But a part of the supply crunch that's going on right now is investors holding on to properties that they picked up in 08, 09, 2010. There's lots of those, and they're getting good rents from it. They can't put their money in a bank and get any more interest in it anymore. Why not keep it in real estate? So that's a perfectly fine business. But at some point, it'd be nice to see some of those coming on the market for particularly entry-level first-time home buyers.
It's another factor as to why there's a shortage.
Exactly.
All right. Ty Brown is with us from the Lexington Bluegrass Association of Realtors. In just a moment, we're going to talk with him about what does it take to get your home ready if you do want to sell. What are some things that buyers are looking for? What adds value and so forth. Back on Kentucky Newsmakers in just a moment. Welcome back, and it's great to have you here on WKYT for Kentucky Newsmakers, and we're visiting with Ty Brown right now. He's serving this year as president of the Lexington Bluegrass Association of Realtors. It's been kind of an interesting year to be in this capacity, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess every year has its own set of challenges. As we talk about right now the fact that there is this shortage of homes for sale in Lexington, there may be some people who are considering getting their property in a position to sell it. What would you have them do?
Well, pricing is obviously your biggest factor always. Yeah. But what things are people looking for right now? I mean, obviously you want to have a clean home, fresh up the paint. I often caution buyers, sellers especially, to not overdo it a lot of times, because if you're changing paint and colors and carpets and things, it may not be what you like if you come in and buy it. So sometimes there's a good, and not overdo it, obviously. But updating your kitchen, your bathroom is always tried and true, been the main things. People want to see that.
Adds value.
Typically, you get the most money back for the money you spend on those. Decks are a big thing, especially this time of year. People want outdoor living. The big trends right now are efficiency. Your smart homes, your smart door locks, your smart thermostats, and things like that. Those are big. People may not be necessarily willing to pay more for that, at a home, but it would separate you from a competitor or from another property. Outdoor living, again, I went into that, and also multi-generational living starting to be a thing. That's usually your higher end homes, but it is something that you're seeing more and more of, and it probably will be in the future. Meaning
there might be quarters for the parents, grandparents,
yeah,
that kind of thing?
Parents coming back in, or even even college kids coming back from college.
Right. Works both ways, right?
Yeah, right.
So as people are getting their homes ready, and they, maybe the curb appeal is something that obviously when you drive up, the first thing you see. What are some quick little things you could do to make it more eye appealing?
I always tell my sellers 85–90% of the whole game's done when they open the front door. So come out, get your realtor, get somebody objective to come out and look at your front of your house, and as soon as they walk in the door. So having your yard trimmed, having some color on your doorsteps, the color of your door, the door handle. Who wants to touch a old run out grimy door handle? Get a new door handle. That makes a huge difference. Realtors will appreciate that if you have a good lock that works and it's easy. Those are big. And then when they go in the house, it wants to be no smells. You got to worry about the pet smells, and a lot of times you're used to it. You may not be able to smell it in your own home. So get somebody to come in to do not necessarily a full-blown staging necessarily, but kind of a walkthrough, kind of a consultation of what it takes to get your house to appeal to the people that are going to be in the market that you're selling to. Don't try to appeal to people in $200,000 houses, more expensive, and not, don't short yourself by going too low either.
When a real estate professional is showing a home and there are questions, well, I don't particularly like this, or I think I would like that. Number one, you're talking about with this shortage of supply in Lexington, you can't be that picky. Do you also suggest to them, well, this can be fixed for this amount, or maybe the owner would take care of this if you talk to them?
Again, it goes back to your price points. Yeah. The lower price point, unfortunately, doesn't have that ability. A lot of times they don't have as much money saved up, or they're maybe getting close to 100% financing, and some of the loan programs don't allow for fix-ups. They have to be ready to go when they come in. But you get into your little, your mid to higher price points, absolutely. Some people can see through it, some people can't. I mean, we've had people who have not bought, I've had people who not bought a home because they didn't like the couch. And the couch will not be here when you buy the home, I promise you. But it's just, they can't get away from it. They focus on it. So things like that are very important to get out because it's, it's a psychological it's a big decision. And people take it serious, and they're oftentimes looking for a reason to disqualify a home.
Well, then the age-old question, should people remove their personal effects from a home? I mean, I guess you want some furniture, but maybe if they have pictures, that kind of thing up, that might not be a good idea, right?
You could ask 3,000 realtors and welcome up 3,000 answers, but for the most part, I think don't overdo it. Declutter, clean. People want to see what they're going to live in. They want to see what the space is going to be. So don't go crazy with it, but obviously you don't want to do something that's going to offend somebody or could be controversial.
In this kind of market and moving forward, what kind of career is realty?
Well, LBAR just went over 3,000 realtors last week, and that's a record high for us. That's a huge number on one end for the size of the community we're in, but we're 22 counties, so that's, if you think about it, about half of them are in Fayette County, half are outside. But the career is a good career. I mean, it's something you have to be prepared for going into it because it's not easy. It's you're taking the biggest asset anybody's maybe ever have, and you're responsible for getting them the most amount of money they can or getting them the best deal you can. And every situation's unique. It's different. There's no two that are the same, and there's a lot of things you can and can't control. So if you're good at that, then real estate may be the business.
I would think different realtors kind of specialize according to maybe, somebody's good at downsizers, and
Absolutely.
maybe somebody else is good with young people, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and having your niche is something that a new person into our business, if they have a niche, do well because they have an affinity group, they know how to market, they know the lingo. It can be commercial, it could be new construction, it could be, like say, downsizers, whatever. That's very helpful to come into the business, absolutely.
Right. Ty Brown with LBAR, thank you for coming. Appreciate it
Thanks
very
for
much.
having us, man.
All right. Thank you for joining us on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Hey, I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. We start earlier than the realtors at 4:30 on WKYT. Make it a good week ahead, everybody.